The sun hung low over the dusty plains of West Texas, casting long shadows across the endless stretch of scrubland that bordered the old Ramirez ranch. It was one of those late afternoon hours where the heat still clung to the air like a stubborn fog, making every breath feel heavy. Maria Gonzalez, a 42-year-old ranch hand who'd spent her life wrangling cattle and mending fences under that relentless sky, wiped the sweat from her brow as she trudged along the perimeter of the property. Her boots crunched over the dry earth, kicking up small clouds of red dirt that settled on her faded jeans and the brim of her worn Stetson hat. Maria had been with the Ramirez family for over 20 years, ever since she left her small town in South Texas, looking for steady work. The ranch was her world, vast, unforgiving, but home. She'd been checking the barbed wire fence that ran along the eastern edge, the one that separated their land from the wilder expanses of the Chihuahuan desert. Predators were a constant threat out here. Coyotes slinked through the nights, picking off calves if the fences weren't tight. Maria's calloused hands gripped the wire cutters in her belt loop, her eyes scanning for any sags or breaks from the recent windstorm. The air smelled of creosote bushes and distant rain that never quite arrived, and the only sounds were the faint buzz of cicadas and the occasional low of cattle in the far pastures. That's when she heard it, a high-pitched, desperate yip that pierced the quiet like a needle. It wasn't the bold howl of an adult coyote, but something smaller, more frantic. Maria froze, her heart skipping a beat. She followed the sound, pushing through a tangle of mesquite branches that scratched at her arms. There, about 50 yards ahead, tangled in the rusted loops of barbed wire along the fence line, was a coyote pup. No bigger than a house cat, its fur matted with dust and blood, the little creature writhed weakly, its tiny paws caught in the barbs. Sharp thorns of wire dug into its side, and a thin trail of crimson stained the ground beneath it. The pup's golden eyes, wide with terror, locked onto Maria's as it let out another pitiful cry, a sound that tugged at something deep in her chest. Before the story goes deeper, make sure to subscribe for more narratives like this. Maria's breath caught in her throat. She'd seen plenty of wildlife in her time. Rattlesnakes coiled in the rocks, roadrunners darting across the trails. But this was different. This wasn't some varmint raiding the henhouse. This was a baby, barely weaned, fighting for its life in a trap meant for bigger threats. The pup's ribs heaved with each labored breath, and it let out a series of sharp whines, twisting its body in a futile attempt to free itself. Blood seeped from a gash on its flank, soaking the tawny fur, and one hind leg hung limp, probably broken from the struggle. Maria approached slowly, her hands raised palms out, murmuring soft words in Spanish under her breath. Tranquilo, pequeño, no te haré daño. Easy, little one, I won't hurt you. She knelt a few feet away, assessing the damage. The barbed wire was old, the kind ranchers had used for decades to keep livestock in and predators out, but it was merciless on something this fragile. The pup's mother was nowhere in sight, likely scared off by the storm or human activity. But Maria knew coyotes were fiercely protective. If she didn't act fast, the little guy wouldn't last the night. Shock and infection would set in quick under this sun. Her mind raced. Call the boss, Mr. Ramirez? He was a practical man. Wouldn't want to waste time on a coyote, even a pup. But Maria couldn't just walk away. She'd lost her own son to a car accident 5 years back, a sharp pain that still lingered like barbed wire in her soul. This pup's cries echoed that helplessness, that raw fight against the inevitable. Pulling her phone from her pocket, Maria dialed her neighbor, Tom Hale, a retired wildlife rehabber who lived a few miles down the dirt road in his double-wide trailer. Tom was in his late 60s, with a salt and pepper beard and a pickup truck always loaded with tools for just these kinds of calls. He'd helped the ranch before, nursing orphaned fawns and patching up birds of prey. Tom, it's Maria from Ramirez. Got a situation out here. A coyote pup's all tangled up in the fence. Looks bad. Can you come? Tom's voice crackled over the line, steady as ever. On my way, darling. Keep it calm if you can. I'll bring the cutters and some gloves. Maria hung up and edged closer, her heart pounding. The pup snapped weakly at the air, its sharp milk teeth bared in fear, but exhaustion was winning. She could see the tremble in its limbs, the way its eyes fluttered. Gently, she extended a gloved hand, speaking softly to soothe it. "Shh, it's okay. Help's coming." As she waited, the desert around her seemed to hold its breath. A hawk circled overhead, its shadow gliding across the fence like a omen. Maria thought about the pup's life so far, born in some hidden den under a rocky outcrop, learning to hunt with its siblings under the moonlit sky. Now this. Human barriers, built for protection, turning deadly. She glanced at the horizon, where the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Tom's truck would be rumbling up the access road soon, but every minute counted. When Tom arrived, his Ford F-150 kicking up gravel, he hopped out with a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. A Vietnam vet with a limp from an old injury, he moved with purposeful grace, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Show me what we got," he said, nodding toward the fence. Maria pointed, and they approached together. The pup's cries had weakened to whimpers, but it still fought, its body arching against the wire. Tom whistled low. "Poor little fella. Barb's got him good. We'll need to cut him free without causing more damage." They worked methodically, Tom using heavy-duty bolt cutters to snip the wire, while Maria held a thick towel ready to wrap the pup once it was loose. The metallic snip echoed in the still air, and the pup yelped in pain as the tension released. Gently, Tom lifted it, bloodied but alive, into the towel. Its body was hot to the touch, pulse racing under Maria's fingers as she helped secure it. "He's a fighter," Tom muttered, loading the bundle into a ventilated crate in the truck bed. "We'll get him to the vet in Alpine. Antibiotics, stitches, might make it if we're lucky." Maria stood back, watching as Tom drove off toward the highway. The fence gaped where they'd cut, a reminder of the thin line between survival and tragedy out here. She mended it quickly, her hands steady but her mind swirling with the pup's eyes, those golden pleas for mercy. As dusk settled, the first stars pricking the velvet sky, Maria walked back to the ranch house, the weight of the day settling in her bones. Little did she know, this rescue was just the beginning, a chain of events that would pull her deeper into the wild underbelly of the desert, testing loyalties and uncovering secrets long buried in the sand. The next morning dawned crisp and clear over the Ramirez Ranch, the kind of West Texas sunrise that painted the horizon in fiery streaks, chasing away the night's chill. Maria rose before the roosters, her body aching from the previous day's labor. But her mind was already back on that fence line. She poured herself a mug of black coffee from the percolator in the ranch kitchen, the bitter steam curling up to mingle with the scent of frying eggs and chorizo that her co-worker, Luis, was whipping up on the old gas stove. Luis was a stocky man in his 50s, with a mustache that drooped like a saddlebag and stories from his days as a rodeo rider. "Oi, Maria, you look like you wrestled a steer last night," he teased, sliding a plate her way. "What kept you out so late?" She hesitated, fork midway to her mouth, the pup's whimpers still echoing in her ears. "Just a coyote pup in the wire. Tom Hale came and took it to the vet," Luis grunted. Not surprised. Wildlife snags were common enough. But Maria could see the flicker of concern in his eyes. Mr. Ramirez ran a tight ship. Distractions like this could mean docked pay if they slowed the herd work. She ate quickly, the food sitting heavy in her stomach, and headed out to the barn where the horses stamped impatiently in their stalls. By mid-morning, the ranch buzzed with activity. The hands were rounding up strays from the north pasture, dust devils swirling in their wake as the cattle lowed and milled. Maria saddled her mare, Rosie, a bay quarter horse with a white blaze and a temperament as steady as the desert floor. She rode the fence line again, this time with a coil of new wire and posts slung over the saddle horn, determined to reinforce the spot where they'd cut the pup free. The sun climbed higher, baking the ground until mirages danced on the horizon, and Maria's thoughts wandered to the little coyote. Would it survive? Tom's voice had been optimistic on the phone last night, but vets in these parts dealt with harsh realities, limited resources, long drives to specialists in El Paso. As she hammered in a new post, sweat trickling down her spine under her flannel shirt, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Tom. "Maria, it's Hale. The pup's hanging in there. Vet stitched him up. 3 gashes, broken leg set with a splint. Name's calling him Fence for now till we figure out more. He's feisty, bit the glove right off the tech." Relief washed over her like cool water from the windmill pump. But Tom wasn't done. "Listen, there's something off. The wire had blood on it that wasn't just the pup's, older stains, like from something bigger, and tracks nearby, not Coyote. Looked like boot prints, fresh ones, mixed with what might be a dog's paws. You see anything unusual out there yesterday?" Maria paused, hammer mid-swing, her eyes scanning the scrub beyond the fence. Boot prints? The ranch bordered BLM land, open range where hunters and hikers sometimes wandered, but this felt too close. "No, nothing. Just the pup." "Why?" Tom's sigh crackled through the line. "Could be nothing. Poachers maybe, or some fool with a hound. But keep an eye out. I'll update you once he's stable." She pocketed the phone, unease settling in her gut like the grit from a sudden gust. The desert held its secrets well, but now they felt closer, pressing in. The afternoon brought a break in the routine when Mr. Ramirez called her into the main house. The patriarch was in his 70s, a wiry man with sun-leathered skin and a limp from a long-ago bull-riding accident. He sat at the oak desk in his study, surrounded by ledgers and faded photos of the ranch in its heyday. His father on horseback. The family gathered for 4th of July barbecues. "Maria, heard about the Coyote from Luis. Good work getting Hale involved, but we can't be sidetracked. Fences are for keeping things out, not playing savior." His tone was gruff, but there was a softness in his eyes. He'd known Maria's loss, the empty chair at family gatherings since her boy's accident. "Just be careful. Things get complicated out there." She nodded, murmuring agreement, but as she left the house, her resolve hardened. Saving that pup wasn't a distraction. It was a reminder that life clung on, barbed wire or not. Riding back to the east fence, she dismounted and walked the line on foot, boots sinking into the sandy soil. That's when she spotted them. Partial prints in the softer dirt near a mesquite thicket. The tread of work boots, size 10 or 11, scuffed with red clay. Nearby, a scatter of what looked like dog hair, coarse and gray, snagged on a thorn bush. Her pulse quickened. No hiker would leave a dog this far out, and hunters stuck to the trails. She snapped photos with her phone. The shutter clicked loud in the silence, then followed the tracks a quarter-mile north, where they faded into rocky ground. By evening, as the hands gathered around the fire pit for beans and tortillas, Maria shared the photos with Luis over a beer. He squinted at the screen, his face hardening. "Mira, that looks like the prints from the old well site. Remember last spring when calves went missing? Ramirez thought it was coyotes, but I found wire snares up there. Illegal ones." Maria's stomach twisted. Snares? For what? Pelts, or worse? West Texas had its share of black market dealings, bobcats for fur, even coyotes for bait in dogfights down in the border towns. The pup's injuries suddenly seemed less like accident and more like collateral. That night, sleep evaded her in the bunkhouse, the creak of the tin roof amplifying her worries. She lay staring at the ceiling, the pup's golden eyes haunting her dreams. Fence, Tom had called it, a fitting name for something caught between worlds. But if poachers were prowling the ranch borders, this rescue might drag the Ramirez family into danger. Maria tossed, the weight of unspoken loyalties pressing down. Tomorrow she'd ride out to the well site alone, before the sun rose high. The desert didn't forgive hesitation, and neither would she. As the first light crept in, Maria slipped out, Rosie's hooves muffled by the dew-damp grass. The well site was a forgotten relic, a rusted pump house half buried in sand, surrounded by yucca and prickly pear. She tied the horse and crept forward, heart hammering. There, half hidden under a tarp, she found it. A coil of snare wire, fresh and lethal, alongside a bloody rag that reeked of iron and fear. Footprints circled the area, leading toward a dry arroyo. Whatever shadows lurked here, they'd drawn blood before, and the pup was just the latest victim. Maria backed away, mind racing with what to do next. Calling the sheriff meant questions, scrutiny on the ranch, but silence? That felt like another kind of trap. The wind whispered through the cactus, carrying the faint, distant yip of a coyote, perhaps the pup's kin, calling into the void. Maria rode back from the well site with the weight of discovery pressing on her like the morning sun, already warming her shoulders. The bloody rag she'd glimpsed under the tarp burned in her memory. Coarse cotton, stained, dark, and crusted, tossed aside like yesterday's trash. She hadn't touched it, hadn't wanted to disturb the scene, but the image clung to her thoughts as Rosie picked her way through the arroyo back toward the ranch. The distant yip she'd heard echoed in her mind, a wild call that felt both mournful and urgent, as if the desert itself was warning her to turn back. But Maria Gonzalez wasn't one to shy from hard truths. Life on the ranch had taught her that ignoring problems only let them fester, like an untreated wound under barbed wire. By the time she reached the barn, the hands were already at work saddling up for the day's branding in the south corral. Dust hung in the air, thick with the scent of horse sweat and fresh hay, and the low bellows of cattle mixed with the clang of tools. Luis spotted her first, wiping his hands on a rag as he leaned against a post. "Back already? Thought you were checking the east line." His eyes narrowed, catching the tension in her posture, the way her fingers gripped the reins a little too tight. She dismounted, leading Rosie into the shade of the overhang. Went a bit farther, found something at the old well, snare wire, fresh, and a rag with blood on it. Not the pup's, I don't think. Luis's face darkened, his mustache twitching as he glanced around to make sure no one else was close. Mr. Ramirez was across the yard, barking orders at a couple of younger vaqueros, his voice carrying over the din. "Poachers," Luis muttered, spitting into the dirt. "Told you last spring it wasn't just coyotes taking those calves. Ramirez wrote it off as losses, but I knew better. Folks down in Presidio been whispering about dogfight rings, baiting with wild pups to train their pits." Maria's stomach churned at the thought. She'd heard the rumors too, cruel operations hidden in the borderlands where desperate men bet on blood for quick cash. The pup's golden eyes flashed in her mind. That desperate fight against the wire now twisted into something darker, more human. "We can't let it slide. If they're on ranch land, it's our fight." Luis nodded slowly, but hesitation flickered in his eyes. He'd been with the Ramirez family longer than she had, loyal to the bone, and stirring up trouble could cost them all. "Talk to Tom first. He's got connections with Fish and Wildlife. I'll keep an eye on the well site, make sure no one tampers with it." She agreed, unsaddling Rosie with quick, efficient movements, her calloused palms brushing the horse's warm flank. The mare nuzzled her shoulder, a small comfort amid the rising unease. As Maria headed to the bunkhouse to clean up, her phone buzzed again. Tom Hale, right on cue. "Maria, pup's doing better than expected. Eating a bit of ground beef this morning, though he's still groggy from the meds. Vet says the leg'll heal if he doesn't chew the splint off. But I checked those tracks you mentioned. Definitely human, and the dog hair. It's from a coyote, adult size. Looks like baiting gone wrong, or maybe the pup got caught in a setup for something else." She leaned against the rough wooden wall of the bunkhouse, the scent of aged pine and lingering coffee from breakfast grounding her. "Found more out here, Tom. Snares at the old well, and blood. Luis thinks poachers, maybe tied to dogfights." There was a pause on the line, the faint hum of Tom's old radio in the background playing some country tune about lost highways. "Damn. That's federal if it's illegal traps on private land. I'll call my buddy at the state office, see if they can send someone discreet. But Maria, you stay clear. These types don't like nosy folks." Hanging up, she felt a surge of determination mixed with fear. Staying clear wasn't in her nature. Not after her son's accident, when she'd learned the cost of looking away. She splashed water on her face from the basin, the coolness shocking against her sun-baked skin, then grabbed a quick bite of leftover tortilla before joining the branding crew. The work was grueling, roping calves, pressing the hot iron to their hides with a sizzle and acrid smoke that stung the eyes. Maria's mind wandered as she held down a squirming animal, its struggles mirroring the pup's. By noon, the sun beat down mercilessly, turning the corral into a furnace, and the hands broke for lunch under the cottonwood tree, passing around thermoses of iced tea and stories to lighten the load. Luis pulled her aside during the meal, his voice low. "Saw a truck earlier, black Chevy, idling on the county road near the east fence. Didn't recognize it. Plates looked Mexican, maybe from Ojinaga. Drove off when I waved." Maria's fork paused over her plate of beans and rice. Ojinaga was just across the border, a hub for smuggling of all kinds, legal and otherwise. The pieces were fitting together too neatly, poachers crossing over, using the ranch's remote edges as a staging ground. "We tell Ramirez tonight," she said firmly. "No more secrets." The afternoon dragged on with fence mending in the west pasture, the wind picking up and carrying the faint howl of a coyote pack from the distant hills. It sent a chill down Maria's spine, a reminder that the wild was closing in. As the sun dipped toward the jagged peaks of the Davis Mountains, painting the sky in bruised purples, she rode solo to check the well site again. The air cooled slightly, scented with blooming nightshade and the earthy promise of evening. Dismounting near the pump house, she scanned the ground. No new tracks, but the tarp had been disturbed, the snare coil partially uncovered as if someone had checked it hastily. Her boot nudged a rock, and something glinted beneath. A spent shotgun shell, brass casing tarnished but recent, embedded in the dirt. Heart racing, she pocketed it carefully, evidence that felt heavier than gold. Footsteps? No, but the shell spoke of violence, perhaps a poacher scaring off competitors, or worse, dispatching a catch. She straightened, ears straining, when a rustle in the mesquite made her freeze. Not wind, a soft whine, low and pained, coming from the arroyo beyond. Cautiously she crept forward, hand on the knife in her belt. There, huddled in the shadow of a boulder, was another coyote, a female, larger than the pup, her side matted with dried blood from a shallow wound. She lifted her head, amber eyes locking onto Maria's with a mix of wariness and exhaustion. No wire this time, but the injury looked like buckshot graze, shallow but enough to weaken her. The mother? It had to be. The same tawny coat, the protective hunch of her body. She didn't snap or flee, just watched, a faint growl rumbling in her throat. Maria's breath hitched. Calling Tom again would bring him out here, risking exposure, but leaving her went against everything. "Easy, Mama," she whispered, inching closer with palms out. The coyote tensed, then licked at her wound with a pained whimper. Maria's mind raced. Wild animals didn't trust humans, but desperation bridged gaps. She backed away slowly, giving the space, and pulled out her phone to snap a photo. Evidence and a plea for help. As she retreated to Rosie, the female's eyes followed her, a silent acknowledgement in the fading light. Riding back under the emerging stars, Maria felt the threads tightening. The pup, the snares. Now this wounded mother. The ranch's quiet edges hid a brewing storm, one that could unravel lives built on hard-won peace. Tomorrow, she'd push Ramirez for action, no matter the cost. The desert night whispered secrets, and she was done listening from the sidelines. The stars wheeled overhead like scattered diamonds as Maria guided Rosie back to the ranch, the horse's hooves clipping softly against the packed earth of the trail. The cool night air carried the sharp tang of creosote and distant mesquite smoke from a neighbor's campfire, but Maria's thoughts were fixed on the wounded coyote she'd left behind in the arroyo. Those amber eyes, so like the pup's but etched with a mother's weary defiance, haunted her. She dismounted at the corral gate, the wooden slats creaking under her weight, and led Rosie into the barn where the other horses nickered in greeting. The lantern light flickered across the stalls, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts of the day's discoveries. Inside the bunkhouse, the hands had turned in early, the air thick with the snores of exhausted men and the faint aroma of cooling coffee from the communal pot. Maria washed up at the sink, the rough bar of lava soap scraping away the desert grit from her hands. But it couldn't scrub clean the unease gnawing at her. She sat on the edge of her cot, the springs groaning, and pulled out her phone. The photo of the injured female coyote stared back at her, hunched against the boulder, fur dulled by dust and blood, her ribs visible with each shallow breath. Maria forwarded it to Tom with a quick text. Found this near the well. Think it's the mother. Shot but alive. What now? Tom's reply came almost immediately, his words blinking onto the screen in the dim glow. Stay put. I'll drive out at first light with a trap and tranquilizer. Can't risk her turning aggressive if cornered. And Maria, don't go back alone. This is escalating. She set the phone down, staring at the cracked plaster ceiling, where shadows from the lantern played out scenes of snares and shotgun shells. Sleep came fitfully, broken by dreams of golden eyes pleading across barbed wire, her son's laughter echoing faintly before fading into the wind. Dawn broke with a vengeance. The sun cresting the horizon in a blaze that turned the ranch into a sea of gold and shadow. Maria was up before the others, brewing coffee strong enough to wake the dead, her mind already mapping the day's risks. Luis joined her in the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his flannel shirt untucked over faded Levi's. You look like hell, amiga. That coyote got you twisted up. He poured himself a mug, the steam rising like a question mark. She nodded, sliding him the phone to show the photo. It's the mother, I know it. Wounded, probably from the same bastard setting those snares. Tom's coming, but we need to tell Ramirez now, before someone gets hurt, for real. Luis studied the image, his jaw tightening. He'd lost a brother to border violence years back. A migrant worker caught in a raid gone wrong, and the scars ran deep. All right. But he's got a meeting with the feed supplier this morning. Wait till after. The ranch stirred to life around them, the clatter of buckets and the whinny of horses filling the air as the hands prepared for another round of herd checks. Maria threw herself into the work, roping feed bales from the loft and mucking stalls, the physical labor a temporary balm against the knot in her chest. By mid-morning, with the sun already scorching the tin roof, Mr. Ramirez emerged from the main house, his boots polished despite the dust, a ledger tucked under his arm. He was a man of routines, up with the cattle and down with the stars. But today his gait seemed heavier, as if the weight of the land pressed harder. Luis caught him near the windmill where the blades creaked lazily in the breeze, pumping water into the troughs with a rhythmic sputter. Maria hung back at first, coiling rope by the fence, but joined them when Ramirez waved her over. What's this about coyotes and snares? He asked, his voice gravelly from years of shouting over wind. Luis laid it out plain. The pup, the tracks, the well site, now the wounded female. Maria added the details of the shotgun shell and the black Chevy on the road, her words steady despite the flutter in her throat. Ramirez listened without interruption, his lined face impassive under the brim of his hat, eyes squinting against the glare. When they finished, he rubbed his chin, the stubble rasping like sandpaper. Poachers on my land? That's a bold play. We've had losses before, but I chalked it to nature. If it's dogfights or pelts, that's trouble we don't need. Sheriff poking around, fines, worse. He paused, glancing toward the eastern fence where it all began, the barbed wire glinting like a warning. Call the authorities, discreetly. I don't want this blowing up the ranch's name. And Maria, you and Luis check the borders today. If you spot that truck again, get plates and back off. Relief mixed with resolve in Maria's chest. It wasn't blind loyalty, but action. What about the mother coyote? She's out there suffering. Ramirez's expression softened, a rare crack in his rancher armor. He'd buried a wife to cancer a decade ago, knew the sting of watching life slip away. Let Hale handle the wild ones. Our job's the herd. But if she's connected, save her if you can. Just come back whole. Tom arrived shortly after, his F-150 rumbling up the drive in a cloud of dust, the bed loaded with crates and a rifle case for the tranquilizer gun. He was dressed for the field, khaki pants tucked into boots, a vest pockets bulging with syringes and gloves. Maria met him at the barn, filling him in on Ramirez's go-ahead. Good man, Tom said, clapping her shoulder. We'll dart her if she's still there, get her patched like the pup. Fence is perking up, by the way, trying to stand on that splint. You're doing, getting him help quick. They set out together, Luis riding shotgun in Tom's truck while Maria followed on Rosie. The horse's ears pricked at the engine's growl. The drive to the arroyo was tense. The radio tuned low to a static-filled news report about border patrols tightening near Big Bend. The landscape unfolded in waves of scrub and rock, yucca spikes like sentinels guarding secrets. As they neared the well site, Tom slowed, scanning for movement. Eyes open. If poachers are around, they might be watching. Dismounting, they approached on foot. The truck left hidden behind a rise. The air hummed with insects, the sun baking the ground into a shimmering haze. At the arroyo edge, Maria's heart sank. The boulder where she'd seen the female was empty, only a few drops of fresh blood staining the sand. Tracks led away, paw prints staggered and deep, heading north into denser mesquite. "She's moving," Tom murmured, kneeling to examine. "Wounded bad, but fighting. We'll follow, but slow. Don't want to push her into collapse." They trailed cautiously, the scent of blood faint but guiding, like a thread pulling them deeper into the wild. An hour in, the tracks veered toward a shallow cave mouth, half obscured by boulders, a den perhaps. A low growl emanated from the shadows, the female's warning clear. Tom raised the tranquilizer rifle, sighting carefully. "Easy now," he whispered. The dart whispered through the air, finding its mark with a soft thud. The growl faded to a sigh, and the coyote slumped, her body going limp in the dimness. Working quickly, Tom and Maria approached. Gloves on, towels ready. She was heavier than expected, her fur warm and matted, the buckshot graze raw along her flank, superficial but infected, pus seeping from the edges. "Mama's a tough one," Tom said, wrapping her gently. "We'll get her to the vet with the pup. Siblings might be nearby too. Dens hold litters." As they loaded her into a shaded crate, Maria spotted them. 2 more pups. Smaller shadows in the den's mouth, yipping softly in confusion. Her breath caught. The family, fractured but alive. Back at the truck, adrenaline ebbed, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Luis radioed from the ranch. "Spotted that black Chevy again, heading east on the county road. Got plates. Looks temporary, no doubt." Maria's grip tightened on the crate's handle, the female's labored breaths sinking with her own resolve. This wasn't just rescue anymore. It was unraveling a web of cruelty that threatened everything she held dear. As they drove back, the desert stretched endless, but for the first time, Maria felt its pulse quicken with purpose. The fight was on, and she was in it to the end. The truck bounced over the rutted trail back to the ranch, the crate in the bed thumping softly with each jolt, the sedated mother's breath steady but shallow through the ventilation slats. Maria rode beside Tom in the cab, her hands clasped tight in her lap, the scent of sagebrush and gun oil hanging heavy in the confined space. The 2 additional pups, tiny bundles of fur no bigger than squirrels, their eyes wide and bewildered, were secured in a separate carrier, mewling faintly as the world rocked around them. Tom's knuckles whitened on the wheel, his gaze flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds, as if expecting that black Chevy to materialize from the dust devil swirling behind them. "Those little ones are probably the pup's siblings," Tom said, breaking the silence as they crested a rise overlooking the Ramirez spread. The ranch house stood like a sentinel in the distance, its whitewashed walls glowing under the midday sun, corrals alive with the distant lowing of cattle. "Den's been disturbed. Poachers might have scared the family into scattering. If Mama hadn't been hurt, she'd have moved them by now." Maria nodded, her throat tight. The image of the female collapsing under the dart replayed in her mind, not as victory, but as another layer of intrusion into a world that had no place for human hands. She'd always respected the coyotes' cunning, their howls a nightly soundtrack to her life here, but now they were symbols of something broken, wild spirits caught in the crosshairs of greed. Luis waited at the barn when they pulled up, his truck idling nearby, a notepad in hand with the Chevy's partial plates scribbled in hasty pencil. The air hummed with the buzz of flies around the manure piles, and the hands paused in their tasks, casting curious glances but keeping their distance. Ramirez's orders to stay focused on the herd held firm. "Got a clear look this time," Luis said, handing over the note as they unloaded the crates. "Plates start with RJ, could be registered out of Redford, but temporary tags like that scream trouble. Drove slow, like scouting." He helped Tom carry the mother's crate into the shade of the tack room, where a fan whirred lazily, stirring the stale air thick with leather and liniment. Maria knelt by the smaller carrier, peering through the mesh at the pups. One, a scruffy male with a black-tipped tail, pawed at the wire, his whimpers piercing her like barbs. The other huddled close, a female with softer fur, her body trembling. "They're starving," she murmured, fetching a shallow dish of water laced with electrolyte powder from Tom's kit. She slid it in carefully, watching as they lapped tentatively, their rough tongues pink against the metal. Tom's face softened as he checked the mother's vitals with a stethoscope, the cold disc pressing against her side. "Pulse is strong. We'll flush that wound at the vet. Antibiotics should knock the infection. But these operations, they're ruthless. Use the young to draw in adults, then trap 'em all." Ramirez joined them then, striding from the house with purposeful steps, his hat pulled low against the glare. He'd aged visibly in the last day, lines etching deeper around his mouth, but his voice carried the steel of a man who'd stared down droughts and market crashes. "Authorities en route?" I called the sheriff's office, told him we got evidence of trespassing, kept the wildlife angle quiet for now. He eyed the crates, a flicker of reluctance crossing his features. Saving coyotes wasn't ranch protocol, but Maria could see the shift in him, the reluctant empathy sparked by her persistence. "Hale, you take 'em to Alpine. Maria, Luis, ride the east border after. If that truck shows, document it, but no heroics." Tom nodded, loading the animals back into the truck with practiced efficiency, the engine coughing to life amid a plume of exhaust. Maria volunteered to go with him, needing the motion to settle her nerves, the open road a brief escape from the ranch's mounting tension. As they pulled away, gravel crunching under the tires, the Davis Mountains loomed on the horizon, their peaks a hazy blue promise of refuge. The drive to Alpine was an hour of winding highway, flanked by endless scrub where jackrabbits darted like shadows. Maria stared out the window, the pup's soft whines from the back a constant undercurrent to the radio's murmur of weather updates. Scattered thunderstorms possible, but the forecast felt as unreliable as the peace they'd shattered. At the vet clinic on the outskirts of town, a low-slung building with peeling paint and a sign reading Big Bend Animal Care, they were met by Dr. Elena Vasquez, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with a ponytail streaked gray and hands scarred from years of fieldwork. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and kibble, empty save for a dozing border collie in the corner. "Coyotes again?" Elena said, arching an eyebrow as they carried in the crates. She'd treated the original pup, Fence, as Tom still called him, and her tone held a mix of exasperation and admiration. "You two are turning this into a wildlife ER. Let's see the damage." In the exam room, under harsh fluorescent lights, Elena worked swiftly. The mother was laid on a steel table, her body limp as the infection was cleaned, povidone iodine stinging the air, the grays debrided to reveal embedded shot pellets that clinked into a tray. "Buckshot. Close range," Elena confirmed, her gloved fingers probing gently. "Not fatal, but she fought hard. These pups are underweight. Worms, probably. I'll start IV fluids." Maria held the smaller one steady as a tube was inserted, its tiny heart fluttering under her palm, a fragile rhythm that mirrored her own unease. Fence was in a recovery kennel nearby, his splinted leg bandaged fresh, watching them with alert eyes through the bars. For a moment the room felt like a fragile sanctuary, the hum of the AC drowning out the world's cruelties. But as Elena sutured the wound, her phone buzzed with a text from the state wildlife office. Tom's contact had pulled strings. "Agents are mobilizing," she relayed, snapping off her gloves. "That truck you described matches a vehicle linked to a poaching ring busted last year in Terlingua, dogfighting bait, just like Hale suspected. They're setting up surveillance near your ranch borders tonight." Maria's pulse quickened, the pieces locking into place with a cold finality. The Ramirez land, once a buffer of isolation, was now ground zero. They left the clinic with the animals stabilized, the mother and pups crated for rehab at Tom's trailer. safer there than the open ranch. The drive back was quieter, the sun dipping low and casting the dashboard in amber light. Maria's mind raced ahead. Luis and Ramirez fortifying the fences, perhaps posting a watch. But as Tom's truck crested the final hill, headlights pierced the twilight ahead. A black Chevy, idling at the county road junction, its silhouette unmistakable against the fading sky. It revved once, then peeled away east, taillights winking like retreating eyes. Tom floored it, but the Chevy vanished into the mesquite, dust trail mocking their pursuit. "They're on to us," he growled, radioing Luis. Maria's hands trembled as she gripped the door handle, the pup's carrier shifting in the bed. The rescue had drawn lines in the sand, and now the shadows were closing in, hungry for what they'd claimed. Back at the ranch, under a canopy of stars, Maria stood by the east fence, the barbed wire humming faintly in the wind. The desert's pulse beat stronger, a call to arms she couldn't ignore. Tomorrow would bring agents, questions, maybe confrontation, but for tonight, the wild family's survival hung in the balance, tethered to her unyielding will. The night air hung heavy over the Ramirez ranch, thick with the scent of cooling earth and the faint, acrid tang of distant wildfires smoldering in the Chihuahuan desert. Maria leaned against the rough post of the east fence, her arms crossed over her chest, the barbed wire humming softly in the breeze like a whispered threat. Stars blanketed the sky, sharp and unyielding, but they offered no comfort, only a vast reminder of how exposed they all were out here. The black Chevy's taillights had vanished into the mesquite an hour ago, but its engine's growl lingered in her ears, a predator's retreat that promised return. Tom's truck idled nearby, the pup's carrier secured in the bed, their soft whines muffled by exhaustion and the sedative's haze. The mother Coyote lay still in her crate, her flank rising and falling in the dim glow of the cab light, a testament to fragile victories. Luis paced the gravel drive, his boots kicking up small puffs of dust that caught in the truck's headlights. "Sheriff's deputy should be here any minute," he said, glancing at his watch, the face illuminated by the screen of his phone. He'd been on the line with dispatch, relaying the plates and the truck's description, his voice steady but edged with the frustration of a man who'd seen too many border shadows slip away. Mr. Ramirez stood a few paces off, silhouetted against the ranch house's porch light, a shotgun cradled loosely in the crook of his arm. Not loaded, but a statement. The old man's face was a mask of weathered resolve, the lines around his eyes deepened by the flickering uncertainty of what this intrusion meant for his legacy. Tom killed the engine, stepping out with a creak of the door, his limp more pronounced in the chill. "Agents from Fish and Wildlife are en route from Marfa, ETA 2 hours. They'll coordinate with the sheriff. But that Chevy, it's circling, testing. We spooked him good today." He rubbed his beard, eyes scanning the horizon where the county road snaked into darkness. Maria pushed off the fence, her flannel shirt damp with evening dew, and joined them. The weight of the day pressed on her shoulders, the dart's flight, the pup's trembling forms, Elena's grim assessment of the wounds. Saving the family felt like pulling threads from a larger tapestry of cruelty, one that could unravel the ranch's quiet existence. Headlights swept the drive then, a county sheriff's SUV rumbling up, its grille emblazoned with the Brewster County seal. Deputy Carla Ortiz hopped out, a compact woman in her 30s with a no-frills uniform and a ponytail pulled tight, her Latina heritage evident in the warm tone of her skin against the khaki. She'd grown up in Alpine, knew the ranch lands like her own backyard, and her handshake was firm as she greeted Ramirez. "Heard you got poachers on your property, Mr. R. Plates check out. Stolen from a junker in Ojinaga, reported last week. Fits the profile for that ring we busted near Study Butte. Dogfighting outfits, baiting with wild canids. Nasty business." Her radio crackled faintly, a dispatcher's voice updating on border crossings, but she muted it, focusing on the group. Maria recounted the discoveries, the snares, the shotgun shell, the wounded mother and pups, her words measured, painting the scene with the precision of someone who'd lived it. Ortiz jotted notes in a battered spiral, nodding as Tom chimed in about the tracks and the den. "You've done our job for us," she said, a hint of respect in her tone. We'll set up a perimeter watch tonight, me and a partner. Agents bring thermal cams at dawn. But if that truck circles back, don't engage. Call it in." Ramirez grunted agreement, but his grip tightened on the shotgun. Losing cattle to rustlers was one thing. This felt personal, a violation of the land that had sustained his family for generations. As Ortiz drove off to stake out the East Road, the group dispersed with uneasy quiet. Tom insisted on taking the Coyotes to his trailer for the night, safer, with kennels and monitors, promising updates by morning. Maria watched his tail lights fade, the pup's carrier a shadowy lump in the bed, and felt a pang of loss. Those golden eyes, now under human care, bridged her world and the wild in ways she couldn't yet fathom. Back in the bunkhouse, the hands murmured around the card table, a half-played game of poker abandoned, but Maria waved off their questions, claiming fatigue. She lay on her cot, the thin blanket scratchy against her skin, staring at the ceiling beams where moonlight slanted through the cracks. Sleep evaded her, replaced by visions of the black Chevy's silhouette, its occupants faceless but driven by the same desperation that had once pushed her own family across borders. Morning arrived with a deceptive calm, the sun rising in a haze of pink and gold. Birdsong piercing the chill as if denying the tension. Maria rose early, brewing coffee in the communal pot. The rich aroma mingling with the sizzle of bacon, Luis fried up. The hands ate in shifts, talk turning to the day's chores, fence repairs, waterline checks, but an undercurrent of vigilance hummed beneath. Ramirez gathered them at the corral, his voice carrying over the horses' stamps. "Eyes open today. Deputy says the agents are here. 2 unmarked cars patrolling the borders. We work, but we watch." Maria nodded, saddling Rosie with quick hands, the leather creaking under her fingers. She'd ride the north perimeter, overlapping with Luis, her phone charged and a small notebook tucked in her saddlebag. The scrubland unfolded under Rosie's steady gait, yucca blooms nodding like white flags in the breeze, the air warming with the promise of another scorcher. Maria's thoughts drifted to the Coyotes. Tom had texted at dawn. Mama stable, pups nursing from a bottle, fence hobbling on his splint. A small mercy amid the storm. An hour in, near the dry creek bed, she spotted it. Fresh tire tracks veering off the faint trail, deep ruts pressed into the soft soil, leading toward a cluster of boulders. Dismounting, she followed on foot, heart thudding against her ribs. The prints matched the Chevy's aggressive tread, and there, half buried under loose dirt, was a cache, more snare wire coiled like serpents, a burlap sack stained with old blood, and a crumpled pack of Mexican cigarettes, the brand popular in Ojinaga dives. She snapped photos, the shutter's click swallowed by the wind, then backed away, scanning for movement. Nothing but the rustle of a roadrunner darting through the creosote. Mounting up, she radioed Luis. "Found a stash north of the creek. Come quick." He arrived minutes later on his gelding, a sorrel named Paco, his face grim as he examined the site. "Bastards are bold. This close to the house?" They marked the spot with a subtle cairn of rocks, evidence for the agents, and rode on, the sun climbing higher, baking sweat into her shirt. By noon, under the sparse shade of a hackberry tree, they shared a lunch of jerky and water from canteens, the metallic tang grounding her. Luis wiped his brow, his eyes distant. "My cousin and Presidio got mixed up in something like this years back, running bait dogs for fights. Ended bad, jail and scars. These poachers, they're ghosts. Crossing at night, gone by dawn." Maria chewed slowly, the words stirring memories of her own losses, the accident that took her son on a rain-slicked highway near Del Rio. "We stop 'em here, for the coyotes, the calves, everything." Their resolve hung between them, unspoken but solid. Afternoon brought the agents, 2 men in plain clothes, one lanky with a Texas drawl, the other stocky and silent, their SUV blending into the ranch's fleet. They took statements at the main house, poring over Maria's photos, the shotgun shell from the well now bagged as evidence. "This ties to a bigger op," the drawl said, sipping iced tea on the porch. "Raids planned for tonight across the county. Your tip's gold." Ramirez paced, arms crossed, the weight of potential fallout etching his features. As the agents left to set up, promising arrests by dawn, Maria felt the air thicken with anticipation. Dusk fell like a curtain, the sky bruising purple over the Davis Mountains. Maria volunteered for the evening watch, perched on a rise overlooking the east fence, binoculars to her eyes. The coyotes' howls rose in the distance, a chorus that tugged at her soul. Family calls, perhaps, mourning or searching. Then headlights. The black Chevy, creeping along the county road, slowing at the junction. She radioed it in, breath held as sirens whooped faintly from the south. The truck lurched, tires spinning dust, but this time, it didn't escape. Blue lights flashed in pursuit, closing the gap. From her vantage, Maria watched the chase unfold, a ballet of shadows and speed, ending in a screech of brakes and shouted commands. Figures emerged, hands up, as deputies swarmed. Relief flooded her, hot and sudden, but it was laced with the sobering truth. One bust didn't end the shadows. As stars emerged, she rode back, the ranch lights welcoming. Her heart steady, with the knowledge that she'd fought and won a piece of the wild back. But the desert held more secrets, and the night whispered of battles yet to come. The ranch house glowed like a beacon in the enveloping night, its windows spilling warm light onto the porch where Ramirez waited, shotgun set aside against the railing. Maria dismounted Rosie at the corral, the horse's sides heaving from the tense ride back, and looped the reins over a post with hands that still trembled faintly from the adrenaline. The distant wail of sirens faded into the wind, replaced by the steady chirp of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl perched in the cottonwoods. She could picture the scene at the county road, deputies cuffing the poachers, their faces illuminated by flashing lights, the black Chevy impounded under the indifferent stars. One victory, but the desert's vastness mocked it. Shadows like these multiplied in the borderlands, fed by poverty and the allure of easy blood money. Inside, the kitchen hummed with subdued energy, the hands gathered around the scarred oak table, plates of reheated tamales and beans pushed aside in favor of coffee mugs steaming in the lantern light. Luis looked up as she entered, his mustache framing a weary smile. Heard the radio chatter. They got two in the truck, Mexicans from Ojinaga, hauling snares and a couple of pit bull pups in the back, half-starved for fights. Plates were fakes, but the Chevys registered to a chop shop in Presidio. Relief rippled through the room, murmurs of approval from the younger vaqueros, but Ramirez's expression remained guarded, his fingers drumming the table's edge. Deputy Ortiz called. Agents are holding them for questioning. Found bait traps in the trunk, blood on the seats. Ties back to that ring in Terlingua. But one bus don't clean the whole mess. They'll roll on their boss for leniency. Maria poured herself a cup, the hot liquid burning her tongue as she sipped, grounding her in the moment. The emotional toll settled in then, a quiet ache amid the chatter, the pup's initial cries, the mother's defiant gaze, the siblings' fragile forms now safe but scarred. She'd started this for a tangled life in the wire, but it had unearthed a human underbelly, mirroring losses she'd buried deep. Her son, Javier, gone at 19 in that wreck, his dreams of ranching cut short like the coyotes' freedom. Saving them felt like a proxy, a way to claw back some control from fate's cruel grip. She sank into a chair, the wood creaking under her weight. What about the coyotes? Tom's got them. Tom had texted during her ride. Mama's responding to meds, infection down, pups bottle-fed, gaining strength. Fence, the original survivor, nuzzled his siblings through the kennel bars, a tiny pack reforming. Maria shared the update, and a collective exhale filled the room. Elena Vasquez had called earlier too, her voice crisp over speakerphone. They're fighters, all of them. Mama's wounds clean. Pups dewormed. Release them in a month if rehab goes smooth. Back to the den site, monitored. The thought of them returning wild, whole, stirred something fierce in Maria's chest, a blend of hope and the sharp sting of what-ifs. Sleep came easier that night, the bunkhouse quiet save for the wind rattling the shutters. Dreams wove through her mind, golden fur against barbed wire, howls blending with Javier's laughter on a long-ago cattle drive. Dawn broke with a soft rain pattering the tin roof, a rare West Texas mercy that turned the ground to mud and filled the air with petrichor. Maria rose, pulling on her boots slick with damp, and joined Luis at the barn. The horses stamped in their stalls, manes damp and shining, as they saddled up for a perimeter sweep. Routine now laced with caution. Ramirez met them at the gate, his limp less pronounced in the cool air. Ortiz says the poachers talked. Boss is a local, runs fights in abandoned barns near the Rio Grande. Raid tonight, countywide. Our land's clear for now, but stay sharp. They rode out under gray skies. The rain a gentle veil that softened the scrub's harsh edges. Water pooled in the arroyos, reflecting the clouds, and the yucca stood taller, as if refreshed by the brief reprieve. Maria's thoughts turned inward, the emotional arc of the past days bending toward reflection. She'd always been the steady one, mending fences literal and figurative, but this had cracked her open, revealing how the wild struggles echoed her own. Spotting a fresh coyote track near the well site, paw prints light and purposeful, she dismounted, kneeling in the mud. Not the family's, wild kin perhaps, drawn by the den's recent occupancy, a sign of resilience, the desert reclaiming its own. By midday, the rain cleared, sun breaking through in shafts that steamed the earth. Back at the ranch, a call from Tom pulled her to the house phone, its cord tangled from disuse. "Maria, get over here when you can. The pups are playing, tumbling like they've forgotten the wire. Mama's watching, protective as ever, and something else." Found a collar on her, embedded in the fur. Old game camera tag, but scratched up. Looks like someone's been tracking packs for months. Her pulse quickened, the revelation hitting like a gut punch. Not random poaching. Targeted, a hunter's game turned deadly. "Who?" "The ring." Tom's voice dropped. "Maybe, or a rancher with a grudge. Elena's running the serial number. Come see for yourself." She drove Tom's spare truck that afternoon, the wipers swishing idly against a spotted windshield, arriving at his trailer amid a cluster of oaks that buffered it from the highway. The place was a haven of controlled chaos, enclosures fenced with chain link, shaded by tarps, the air rich with the scent of kibble and pine shavings. Tom met her at the gate, his beard flecked with rain, leading her to the main kennel. There they were, the family reunited in a spacious run, the mother pacing the perimeter with a vigilant limp, her amber eyes flicking to Maria without fear, only wary acknowledgement. Fence hopped on 3 legs, nipping at his siblings' ears, their yips a joyful counterpoint to the ordeal. Kneeling at the fence, Maria extended a hand, palm flat with a scrap of meat. The mother approached slowly, sniffing before taking it, her rough tongue brushing Maria's skin, a tentative trust forged in shared survival. Tears pricked her eyes then, unbidden, the emotional dam breaking. This wasn't just rescue. It was redemption, a bridge over the chasm of her grief. Tom crouched beside her, pointing to the collar's faded tag. "Serial matches a research permit, issued to a guy named Harlan Beck, out of Sulross University. But it's expired and scratched like someone tampered. Beck's clean, but maybe he sold data to the poachers." The words hung heavy, another layer of betrayal in a land where alliances shifted like sand. Maria stroked Fence's head through the wire as he bounded over, his splint off now, leg wobbling but strong. "We'll get answers," she said, voice thick. "For them." As she drove back, the sun setting in a blaze of orange, the rain's gift lingered in puddles mirroring the sky. The bust had cracked the ring, but secrets like Beck's hinted at deeper roots, academia, greed, the blurred lines of conservation and exploitation. Maria's resolve hardened. She'd testify if needed, chase every lead. The Coyote's second chance was hers too, a light piercing the desert's unyielding dark. Evening brought the raid's aftermath via radio. The boss nabbed in a Presidio warehouse, pits and bait dogs seized, the operation gutted. Cheers erupted in the bunkhouse, but Maria sat quiet, the mother's gaze etched in her mind. Tomorrow she'd visit again, watch them heal. The wild called back and she answered, one paw print at a time. The morning sun filtered through the trailer's mesh screens, casting dappled patterns on the kennel floor where the Coyote family stirred. Maria arrived at Tom's place just after dawn, the gravel crunching under her truck's tires as she parked beside his F-150, still bearing the faint mud streaks from the rainy patrol. The air was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of wet sage and the subtle musk of animals rousing from sleep. Tom was already out, feeding a trio of orphaned javelinas in an adjacent pen, their snorts a rhythmic backdrop to the quiet. He straightened as she approached, wiping his hands on his jeans, his face etched with the fatigue of a man who'd spent the night monitoring radio updates from the sheriff's office. "Morning, Maria. They're doing good. Better than good, actually." He nodded toward the main enclosure where the mother coyote paced with renewed purpose, her limp barely noticeable now that the antibiotics had kicked in. Her flank bore a fresh scar, shaved and stitched neatly by Elena, a pink line against the tawny fur that would fade into invisibility under the desert sun. The pups tumbled nearby, a whirlwind of nips and playful tumbles, Fence leading the charge with his siblings in tow. The black-tipped male pounced on a shadow, while the softer-furred female darted after a moth fluttering against the chain link. Their yips were sharp, full of the unscarred vitality of youth, a sound that cut through Maria's chest like sunlight piercing clouds. She knelt at the fence, her fingers curling around the wire, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from their bodies. The mother paused her circuit, amber eyes locking onto Maria's with that same wary intelligence, no longer edged with pure desperation, but tempered by something akin to recognition. "You saved us," Maria whispered, the words slipping out unbidden, her voice thick with the emotion she'd held at bay for days. Tom crouched beside her, pulling a rawhide chew from his pocket and tossing it into the run. The pups swarmed it, Fence claiming the prize with a triumphant growl that dissolved into joyful chaos. "Elena checked him yesterday afternoon," Tom said, his tone measured, pulling her back from the moment. "Pups are up to weight. No more worms. Mama's eating solid. Ground venison with meds mixed in. That collar, though. Serial number traced back to Harlan Beck, all right. Guy's a adjunct prof at Sol Ross, studies coyote migration patterns for a grant. But the permit lapsed 2 years ago, and he claims the collar was stolen from his truck during a field trip last fall. Says he reported it, but paperwork got lost in the shuffle." Maria's jaw tightened, the revelation souring the morning's fragile peace. Stolen or not, it meant someone had used research tools for darker ends, tracking packs to set snares, turning science into slaughter. "And the poachers? They point to him?" Tom shook his head, rubbing the back of his neck. "Nah, the two in the Chevy rolled on their boss. But he's denying any university ties. Beck's clean on paper, no priors, glowing refs from grad students. But Elena's buddy at the state lab is running the scratches on the collar for prints. Could be nothing, or it could blow the whole ring wide open." She watched as the mother nosed the rawhide away from her brood, her protective instincts undimmed, and felt a surge of protectiveness mirror her own. This family had clawed back from the brink, but the shadows of human meddling lingered like burrs in fur. Rising, Maria brushed dirt from her knees, her boots scuffing the packed earth. "I'll talk to Ramirez. If Beck's involved, even peripherally, we need eyes on him. The ranch borders his study areas. Maybe he's been feeding tips without knowing." Back at the ranch by mid-morning, the yard bustled under a sky clearing to brilliant blue, the rain's gift leaving the ground soft and the air humming with promise. Luis was reinforcing the east fence, hammering new barbs into posts with rhythmic thuds that echoed her resolve. He paused as she approached, sweat beading on his brow, and wiped it away with a forearm. "Tom, fill you in. Heard on the scanner. Raid netted 6 more last night, including the boss. Fights shut down, dogs to shelters. But that collar story's got folks talking in Alpine." Maria relayed the details, her words clipped as they walked the line together, the wire singing taut under their inspection. Ramirez joined them from the house, a thermos of coffee in hand, his limp eased by the cooler weather. The bust had lightened his features, but caution lingered in his eyes, a rancher's wariness of loose ends. "Beck, huh? I know the name. Lectures at the co-op sometimes about predator control. If he's tangled in this, it's bad for all of us. Universities pull strings, could drag the ranch into lawsuits if we push too hard. He poured steaming mugs, the bitter aroma grounding the discussion. But we owe it to those coyotes. Call Ortiz. See if she can lean on him without tipping our hand. The deputy arrived by noon, her SUV kicking up drying mud as she pulled in. Carla Ortiz stepped out, notebook in hand, her uniform crisp despite the dust. They gathered in the shade of the windmill, its blades groaning lazily overhead, the trough water rippling from a light breeze. "Beck's on our radar now," she confirmed after hearing Maria out. "Interviewed him this morning. Nervous but cooperative. Claims the collar theft was real, but we're pulling his field logs. If he shared GPS data from tagged animals, even innocently, it's aiding and abetting. Poachers confirmed they bought tracking info from a professor type last year. Description fits." Maria's pulse quickened, the threads weaving tighter. The family, they're healing. But if more collars are out there, guiding traps. Ortiz nodded, her expression softening. "We'll sweep the study sites. Your photos from the well and creek? Gold. Led us to 2 more caches this morning. Wire, bait lures. This ends it, Maria. No more shadows on your fences." As Ortiz drove off, Maria saddled Rosie for a solo ride, needing the rhythm of hooves to process the whirlwind. The north perimeter stretched under the sun, creosote bushes releasing their resinous scent with each gust, the landscape alive with small signs of recovery, jackrabbits bounding from cover, a hawk wheeling high. Near the creek bed, she dismounted to check the cairn they'd left, finding it undisturbed, but a new set of tracks caught her eye. Not tire ruts, but boot prints, fresh and deliberate, circling the stash site. Her hand went to her phone instinctively, snapping images, the shutters click a solitary echo. Heart pounding, she followed them a short way, the prints fading into rocky outcrop where a discarded latex glove snagged on a thorn. Evidence of a hasty cleanup, perhaps Beck himself tying off loose ends. She pocketed it carefully, the rubber cool against her palm, and radioed Luis. "Got something up here. Looks like someone beat the agents to the punch." By the time he arrived, the sun hung high, baking the tension into the air. They marked the spot, waiting for Ortiz's team, the weight stretching like wire under strain. Afternoon waned into golden light as the agents swarmed the site, dusting the glove for prints while thermal drones buzzed overhead, scanning for hidden dens or traps. One agent, the lanky Texan from before, approached Maria with a grim nod. "Glove's got partials, running 'em now. But we found another den nearby, empty but baited. Beck's logs show he was here last week." The confirmation hit like a revelation, injustice flaring hot. A man sworn to protect turning informant, witting or not, for the sake of grants or grudges. Back at Tom's by dusk, Maria checked on the coyotes one last time. The mother stood tall now, her pups clustered at her heels, eyes bright with the spark of wild potential. Fence met her gaze through the fence, a soft chuff escaping him, as if sensing the turning tide. Tom clapped her shoulder. "They'll be ready for release soon, stronger for what they've been through." Driving home under a canopy of emerging stars, Maria felt the arc bend toward closure. The poachers caged, Beck under scrutiny, the family mending. But the desert's heart beat on, resilient and raw, pulling her deeper into its unyielding embrace. One more dawn, and the wild would call them home. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon like a hesitant promise, painting the edges of Tom's trailer in soft pinks and golds that filtered through the chain-link enclosures. Maria pulled up in her battered Chevy, the engine ticking as it cooled, and stepped out into air still laced with the night's damp chill. The desert had quieted overnight, the wind's whisper replaced by the subtle rustle of leaves in the oaks and the distant call of a mourning dove. She carried a small cooler with fresh ground meat from the ranch, venison mixed with vitamins, as Elena had prescribed, her boots leaving faint prints in the dew-kissed gravel. Tom was already up, silhouetted against the kennel door, a thermos of coffee in one hand and a clipboard in the other, jotting notes on the family's progress. "Morning," he greeted, his voice gravelly from lack of sleep, but his eyes held a spark of optimism. "They're ready. Elena gave the all-clear yesterday afternoon. Mama's scars healed clean, no infection rebound. Pups are weaned strong, hitting all the milestones for their age. Maria nodded, following him to the main run, where the Coyote family moved with a fluid grace that belied their recent trials. The mother stood at the center, her amber eyes scanning the enclosure with sharp awareness, her body lean and alert once more. No trace of the limp remained. The stitches had dissolved under her constant grooming, leaving only a faint white line hidden in her fur. Fence and his siblings cavorted nearby, chasing each other in looping patterns that stirred the pine shavings into small clouds, their yips a symphony of reclaimed joy. Kneeling at the fence, Maria watched as Fence approached first, his once broken leg bearing full weight now, the muscles knitting back with youthful resilience. He tilted his head, ears perked, and let out a soft huff, a sound that carried no fear, only curiosity. The mother joined him, nosing her pups into line with gentle nudges, her gaze meeting Maria's without the wild edge of before. In that moment, under the warming sun, Maria felt the full weight of the arc they'd traversed, from the pups' desperate cries tangled in barbed wire to this fragile harmony, forged in blood and human intervention. Tears welled unbidden, blurring the scene, as she reached through the wire with a scrap of meat. The mother took it delicately, then dropped a piece for her brood, a quiet act of sharing that bridged their worlds. Tom set the clipboard aside, unlocking the gate with a metallic click that echoed in the still morning. Release sites prepped, back near the original den, away from roads and snares. Agents cleared it yesterday, no more caches in a 5-mile radius. Beck's cooperating fully now. Turns out he did sell old data to cover grant shortfalls, thought it was just for research. Facing charges, but the ring's dismantled. No more ghosts on your fences. His words landed softly, the injustice of Beck's betrayal tempered by the sweep of justice that followed. The professor's logs had exposed a network stretching to border fight pits, leading to more arrests and seized equipment. Ramirez Ranch stood cleared, its borders reinforced, not just with wire, but with vigilance that would linger. They worked methodically, loading the family into a spacious travel crate lined with blankets and familiar scents from the enclosure, Tom's way of easing the transition. The pups scrambled in eagerly, tumbling over each other, while the mother entered with dignified poise, circling once before settling. Maria secured the latch, her fingers lingering on the cool metal, a final tether to the lives they'd pulled from the brink. The drive to the release site was short, winding through scrubland where wildflowers nodded after the rain, their petals unfurling in the light. The arroyo near the well site looked transformed, the boulders casting welcoming shadows, the air humming with the buzz of bees and the faint trickle of residual water in the creek bed. At the spot, a shaded hollow ringed by mesquite and rock, far from human trails, Tom backed the truck to the edge, the engine's rumble fading to silence. He opened the crate door, stepping back with hands raised. Go on now. Home's waiting. The mother emerged first, pausing at the threshold to sniff the wind, her ears swiveling to catch the desert's pulse. She stepped out, paws sinking into the soft earth, and lifted her head, a low chuff calling her young. The pups spilled after her, Fence bounding ahead with a joyful leap, his siblings close behind, their forms blurring into the underbrush as instinct took hold. They paused once, turning as a unit to glance back, golden eyes catching the sun, a collective gaze that held gratitude or farewell, or perhaps both. Maria's breath caught, the scene etching into her soul like a brand. The mother lingered longest, her body silhouetted against the rising sun, before she turned and melted into the mesquite, her family trailing in a loose pack. A distant yip echoed moments later, answered by wild kin from the hills, the chorus swelling as if welcoming them back to the fold. Tom clapped her on the back, his voice rough with emotion. You did this, Maria. Not just the rescue, the whole damn thing. From wire to wild. She stood there long after they'd gone, the wind carrying the faint scent of fur and freedom, her heart swelling with a peace hard won. Back at the ranch, life resumed its rhythm. Fences mended under clear skies, cattle lowing in the pastures, the hands sharing stories around the fire pit that night, the bust a legend in the making. Ramirez raised a toast with whiskey from his private stash, his gruff voice acknowledging her role, the first crack in years toward mending his own guarded heart. Luis pulled her aside later, his smile genuine. You gave him a chance, amiga, and us too, showed what sticking it out looks like. As the stars wheeled overhead, Maria lay in the bunkhouse, the ceiling's cracks mapping constellations of memory. The coyotes roamed free now, their howls a nightly affirmation of survival's quiet triumph. Grief for Javier lingered, a shadow softened by purpose. The desert's injustices met with unyielding resolve. In saving the wild, she'd reclaimed a piece of herself, one cry at a time. Leave a comment sharing what you thought about this story.